It's not easy to talk about this stuff. I have to reveal a part of my life that, is really a very personal thing for me. In 2009, I was set to deploy again, and they sent my unit to Eglin Air Force Base. One day, I was riding with an Air Force security forces. He said, "You want to ride up to the site with me?" I said, "Sure." When we got there, it looked just like an old radio station. It was oddly shaped. I look at their mission statement on the wall. It said, "We monitor all space activity, terrestrial and extraterrestrial, from planet Earth." Look, I never signed an NDA. The only reason I'm doing it is because I know the government's lying.
Welcome to the Close Encounter Club. I'm your host, Justin Gearhart. This is the first episode that I am actually a little bit hesitant to release. Not because it's too wild or too graphic, but because of who it might piss off. And if you know me in real life, you know that I am probably one of the most direct, transparent people that you will ever meet. But this story really has it testing that part of me because of the names that it touches. Tonight's guest is William Carter, a former Marine and a man who has spoken to people like Ross Coulthart, Jeremy Corbell, some of the biggest names in the UFO space. And when William shared his story with them, they didn't believe him, or at least that's what they said. And if I'm being honest, people like Ross Coulthart and Jeremy Corbell used to be the litmus test for me. Heck, I have a Bob Lazar drawing on my wall right here. I used to think if Ross and Jeremy didn't run to it, it wasn't worth exploring. But lately, that trust has started to crack a little bit, especially with some of the recent claims with Coulthart and some of the video that Jeremy has shared recently. I've started to question some of the foundation of this whole movement, the whole trust me bro culture, the reverence for secrecy dressed up as disclosure. Now, I'm not telling you this story is true. I'm not even sure if I believe it, to be honest. I'm also not an investigative journalist. I did my best to verify William's claims, but I do know one thing. It deserves to be heard. So, take a breath and just listen. This is episode 17, Site C6, Eglin Air Force Base, and you're listening to the Close Encounter Club.
My name is William Ray Carter. I was born in Athens, Georgia. My family actually lived outside of Athens, about 7 miles away in Hull, Georgia. And my family lived there till about, let's say, 1979. Then we moved to Chattanooga. What had happened was around 1977, beginning of 1978, me and my mother kind of went back and forth on the dates, but one night, I was walking across this little rocky road that we had in the middle of this really small trailer park that we lived in Hull. It had about 8 trailers in the whole trailer park. There was 4 on each side of this little road that ran through the middle. I was barefooted. I remember that much, and I remember getting about halfway across the road, and I caught something out of my right eye, and it was probably about 80 yards away, and at first I thought it was a fire. It was glowing like a fire, and I started to see it move slightly. It was behind a few trees. I was just frozen staring at this thing because even at that time, being that young, my first thought was this fire is going to burn our house down or something. So I'm sitting there just frozen looking at it, trying to figure out what it was because I'd never seen anything like that before and not seen anything like that since. I start hearing this voice over to my left, and it's my mother calling out my name.
William! William!
I look over, and she's motioning for me to come to our trailer, which was on the other side of the road. It was a little bit behind me where our trailer was located. I'm looking at this thing the whole time, just backing up towards her, and I'm just transfixed on it. and she shoves me behind her, and she's crouched down with my sister and I behind her, looking around the corner of the trailer, looking at this thing. And I remembered her pushing us like into the trailer and locking the door. The next morning, we went out to this big field that was behind the trailer park. There was a huge field behind the trailer park. We went through the barbed wire fence that surrounds the field, and I remember being a little nervous about going through the barbed wire. And me, my mother, and my sister go out there. Now, where we get to in the field is a little bit over to the left of where I seen this thing the night before. We walk out into the field, not very far. I can't remember how far out we walked, but there was this huge burnt circle left in the field. And I remember thinking how surreal it felt. It felt like, it almost felt like I was dreaming, when I was looking at it, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. After it happened, I waited to see if maybe there was something else that maybe I would see when I was a grown-up that it would explain it to me, because my mother and I never spoke about it, ever. Well, when I got older, after I graduated high school, I joined the Marine Corps in 1994. I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps. I got out and was going to college. Around 2003, I was still trying to finish school. I had a family, and at this time, we were living in Alabama. We'd moved to Alabama in 1983. We went from Old Georgia to Chattanooga, Tennessee around 1979, and then we moved to Fort Payne, Alabama in 1983. After I graduated high school and went into the Marines, I got out, was going to college, had 2 stepchildren, and I was planning on never going back into the military. So I did 3 more years in the National Guard from 2003 to 06. I was stop lost while I was overseas. My son was born, so when my unit came back, I got out again for 2 or 3 years, and I never got finished with college when I was in, because deployments were going back and forth like crazy back then, so you really couldn't focus on school because the war was going on at that time.
And what year was that?
That was my second time was 03 to 06.
Okay.
I got divorced around 2009, and I ended up going back into the military in 2009. I went in the National Guard again for another enlistment in 2009, and I stayed till 2012. Well, in 2009, I was set to deploy again, and they sent my unit to Eglin Air Force Base in July of 2009. I was part of a military police unit. They sent everybody to Eglin for like a pre-deployment thing to kind of get you used to the heat. We were going down there for about 2 weeks. And the first day we got to a safety brief. Anytime you go to a military base and you're working in military police, you have what you call guard mount every day before you go out on patrol. This was to give us a safety brief of the entire base, to tell us all the different types of things that go on at the base. And Eglin is very huge. It's like, I believe, the biggest Air Force base in the U.S., maybe the world. I don't know how it compares to other Air Force bases, but it's a huge base.
I work with a retired Air Force major, and I walked into work today and I actually said, hey, I'm interviewing this guy that I met on Reddit, and we actually looked up Eglin on Google Maps, and we actually looked at Site 6, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but it is a massive base. And there looks like there's almost like a range next to it, like to the north.
Yeah, we were located about 20 miles inside the base where we were billeted to stay. Now, we had 2 roles there. One was marijuana eradication. The other thing we were going to be practicing Garrison security with the Air Force security force guys while we were there. On days that we weren't in the swamps looking for marijuana, which most of those days we were just driving Humvees through the mud, just goofing off, really. And we never found any marijuana.
Oh, really?
Let me go back to the first day we got there. The security guy that gave us the brief told us about the different areas we would be patrolling there. And he said that if we were lucky, we would get to ride with the Marine Patrol that patrols the waters outside the base. And occasionally, they get to see space junk that falls in the water there. After he said it, I didn't think no more of it. I was patrolling 2 or 3 different times with 2 or 3 different Air Force security force guys. One day, I was riding with an Air Force security forces guy. He was talking to me about football. I'm a big football fan. I played ball in school. He was telling me he played for Colorado or Colorado State. He was like a kickoff return guy or something, but he joined the Air Force. He said, "You want to ride up to the site with me?" I said, "Sure." We go up this dirt road out from nowhere. I mean, it didn't look like it was leading to anywhere. And when we got there, it looked just like an old radio station that you'd see, off on some country road somewhere. It was oddly shaped. I remember that. I didn't know it was a radar station at the time. We entered the building, and there was a Air Force Security Force airman at a podium to my left when we walked in. The guy that I rode with, he walked ahead of me into this little corridor past the lobby area where I was standing, and he met a guy at the door in a lab coat. The guy had a white lab coat on. And I'm just kind of looking at the place, checking it out. I look at their mission statement on the wall. It said, "We monitor all space activity, terrestrial and extraterrestrial, from planet Earth." As soon as I read that, I recalled the sighting that I had when I was a kid with my mother. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I got cold chills all over me. It freaked me out because I had never talked about that incident with anybody. I'd never even mentioned it to my mother. I mean, we never talked about it after it happened.
What was running through your head? Obviously, you recalled the sighting you had when you were a kid, but
I had something deep down inside of me tell me to get out of that place. Something deep inside me said, "Get out of here. Get out of this place."
like you were somewhere you maybe shouldn't have been, almost.
That's what I felt like I was in a place I shouldn't be, which it's a restricted site. All military police have secret security clearances. Anyway, you have to have one to be an MP. I didn't say anything. I got a little shaky, and I was waiting for the guy that I came there with to come on because I just wanted to leave after I saw that. We got in the truck, and I didn't say a word to him. I mean, we were just talking it up before we went to that place. And I don't know if he took me there to show me that place, on purpose. It was like just kind of blow my mind because we had been talking about religion. And the guy said he was a Jesuit Jew, and I did not know what that was. He was explaining to me that they are, Jewish people that believe in God, and it's kind of like Christianity. When we left that place, I didn't speak. I didn't have anything to say. When I went back to my unit, and I believe I'm the only one from my unit that had a chance to go there. I've talked to a few of the guys in my unit because there's 2 guys in my unit that live here in my city. I ran into one the other day. He's a disabled vet. He had just gotten back from Iraq a year or so after. I was actually slated to go to Iraq with him at the time, but he ended up going over there and getting wounded. I ended up having to have another operation, so I didn't get to go that time around, which I guess was good because there was like 10 guys in my unit that got wounded there. That incident happened. I didn't speak about it for a long time. Things started to happen around my house. Like, I started seeing like strange indentations in my yard. I had like a fence in my backyard, looked like something sat on it. which I took pictures of all this stuff. I had a guy from, he said he was from MUFON, that he worked with him. He was a scientist from UAB, and he gave me a call, and I was telling him some of the things that I was seeing around the house. Something sat on my fence, bent my fence, and it made like a semicircular indentation in the vegetation outside of my fence, and it killed everything underneath it. And there was like two places like this. They measured like 5 foot across. Somebody tried to tell me that it was like a deer bed or something, which I used to deer hunt, and we don't have deer that come this close into the city. I mean, I'm not out in the country, and I'm not in the heart of the city either. But I have security cameras, and a deer would not have sat on top of the fence. It's too high.
Yeah.
So
I have a question. So how long were you in the site C6?
maybe 15 minutes.
Okay. And was it that same day, or was it shortly after that you started noticing things around your house?
No, actually, it was several years.
Oh, okay. So this was a considerable amount of time after you
Yeah.
went to. Okay.
Yeah, it was like 10 years
Is
later.
it still in Florida, like near Eglin, or?
No, I was in the Alabama National Guard at the time, and my unit was sent down there to do a pre-mobilization. We were down there for like a summer camp. They were trying to get us acclimated to the heat because it's very hot down there, like it is overseas. And they were just doing everything they can, before we went on another deployment. I started seeing these things, around the house, like across from this indentation, the side of the tree that was in front of it was scorched on one side. I started thinking about the encounter that I had when I was a kid, and I started thinking about what I saw at Eglin. And something else that I saw at Eglin, one day I was in the Humvee, and we were, just riding the trails, looking around for what we could find. And I had to stop to make a nature call. So I got out of the Humvee and I heard something break in the woods, something that got my attention. I looked over, and there was about 20 guys over to my left. They were sitting how we used to sit in the Marine Corps, which is left over right. And they had their hands on their knees. And they were dressed in black. They didn't have army helmets on. They had like repellent helmets on, is what kind of helmets they were wearing. They weren't really dressed like Army Rangers or anything that I'd ever seen dressed like that. But for some reason, they didn't want me to know they were there, which I could have cared less if they were out there. I just happened to see them. And later on, I started hearing about these retrieval teams that might be on Eglin and all this stuff. So I don't really know what those guys were, but they didn't want me to see them. And I started thinking about all those things later on when I started having these things happen around my house. I was recording things on my security cameras. I have motion sensor security cameras. It'll record for like 20 seconds. So finally, I talked to my mother about what happened in Georgia. I asked her, I said, what happened that night? Is it something that, did I dream all that? I mean, it was something that I cannot forget. It's just like burned into my brain and my memory. She about jumped out of her chair. She said, "You remember that?" I said, "Yeah, I remember that. I remember the night before. I remember seeing this thing out in the field. I remember it looked like a glowing fire. And I remember us going through the barbed wire fence the next day, standing around this big, huge burnt circle in the field." She told me that she had seen the thing land. She said that I kept trying to look around her to see it. And she kept trying to push me behind her. And I've always been a real nosy kid. If I see something that, I want to know more about, it just consumes me, So she saw a ramp come out of it. And she said it had 3 legs. She actually drew it. there was a lady that came here to do a documentary about us, and she stayed for about 3 days. I haven't seen her since. She was Chinese. She said she was a film student from NYU, and she stayed at the motel here and listened to everything we had to say. And she drew the picture of the craft for her. And she drew like 3 legs, and then she drew a ramp that came out of it. She said when she saw the ramp come out, that's when she got us into the house and locked the door. I asked her, I said, well, why didn't you call someone? She said they were locking people up at that time that were reporting these things. She said that any time that somebody reported those, she said everybody were seeing them down there. They were putting people in psychiatric facilities, and people were disappearing. And that's when she told me about another encounter that happened before that night. And she was with her fiance at the time, his brother, and his girlfriend. They were driving down the road, and this thing came over the car. My mother and her fiance were in the front seat. This man and his girlfriend were in the back seat. And he was looking out the back window, and he said, this thing's following us. And she said it paced them for a few miles, and finally it just took off. Well, this guy, he came up missing about 5 years after that. He's never been found. I didn't know it till I read his brother's obituary, which was my mother's fiance. I read his obituary, and it said his brother was still missing. Now, I've looked on missing persons lists online for Georgia, and this guy is on no missing persons list anywhere. The guy was coming home from work, and he just never made it home. His name was Ronnie Thomas. He went missing in about 1983. And I could, give you guys his brother Lamar, which is my mother's fiance. I could show you his obituary where it shows all this stuff. And when his sister passed away in 2012, the guy was still not found. So that was strange to me that this guy's not on any missing persons list whatsoever.
Yeah, that is weird.
I get on Reddit. I don't do a lot of social media. I do have like an X account that I made for some kind of Spaces interview I did. I didn't even know what Spaces was. Anyway, I got on Reddit because I like to read, and I got on a subreddit called Machine Porn, and I ran into this guy. He was actually a radar technician at Eglin at Site C6. And what I ran across was a picture of the facility, because at the time I didn't even know the name of the facility. I just knew what it looked like. It was odd shaped. And there was a picture of it in Machine Porn. And it said the name. You can actually Google the site itself, and it'll tell you about it. The place is pretty extraordinary. He told me, he said, if you're former military, he said, I'll talk to you. He said, he was in his 60s now, and he said he was like a motocross rider. He had worked for EG&G and a bunch of other different companies that we hear about, that's related to UAP research.
From here on out in the conversation, William will start mentioning someone by the name of Ross. He is talking about NewsNation's Ross Coulthart.
I gave all the chat transcripts to Ross when I talked with him to prove what I was saying. And the guy told me that while he was there, they definitely monitored UFOs when he was there. And that he had friends coming up missing after he left. He was there from 81 to 84. He was telling me in the chat that the name of a friend of his that they said he committed suicide. But there was never a body. He never got to attend his funeral. None of this stuff. This place, it can monitor objects 22,000 nautical miles into space, the size of a grapefruit, and they can monitor thousands of them at a time. So, what a lot of people don't understand, and I don't know if Ross understood this or not, if you can determine where these things come from that far out, you definitely know where they go when they get here. And see, that's why they don't want to open this can of worms to the public, because they'll have to answer more questions. So they don't, they admit some of the things that they do at the site online, but what they don't tell you is that they also monitor UAPs.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense to me. I mean, if you think about it, if back in the 40s we started seeing these crashes or donations, or whatever you want to call them, right? And the military became aware of that there are these things that they're not from Earth, right? Fast forward 40 years in the 80s, and you have this Site C6, or you have this facility that is built for as multi-purpose potentially. You do have to probably monitor for, I guess, space junk or satellites that are re-entering into orbit. Or I know Cape Canaveral, I can never say that word. Cape Canaveral is in Florida, but I think it's on the other coast. I think it's on the west side of Florida, I believe, right? And it's more south, I think, than where we're talking in with Eglin. But I mean, you're launching rockets in the space in that general area, so it makes sense to put, an Air Force base there with the capability of monitoring this sort of thing. But yeah, as time goes on, if I'm the government, I'm going to use a site like that to monitor UAP if that is a real thing. So it makes sense that that is something that you would see there.
The radar extends, it's not just off the coast, it goes over to the Pacific Ocean, to the Kwajalein Atolls and the Marshall Islands. And it's part of the space fence. And it utilizes both phased array radars to conduct near Earth and deep space tracking, space object identification, and characterization to provide targetable intelligence in support of a space domain awareness mission. That is the 20th SPSS, as the preponderance of Department of Defense space domain awareness assets, and has the capability of finding, fixing, tracking, and targeting man-made objects in multiple orbital regiments, like from golf ball size objects 7,000 kilometers away with the Eglin radar to objects the size of a basketball 40,000 kilometers away with the more advanced space fence system. But basically, they have a view, like a 360 view of the entire globe for the other radars that they connect to. Like I said, Chris Mellon has mentioned this many times, but he won't be specific about what place tracks this stuff, right? I knew right away he was talking about Eglin at Site C6. And I told Ross this, which Ross, the only thing that he kept asking me was, did I see a UFO there? Did I see a UFO? And, I hate to disappoint him, but, the thing was, that was not the big picture I was trying to tell him. What didn't really grasp it was, and had I not had these things happen to me when I was a kid, I wouldn't have looked into it a little bit more, thoroughly before, I found all this stuff out. I would have just walked into the place and read their mission statement and been like, oh, that's kind of cool. And that would have been it. If I had not had that happen to me when I was a kid, I wouldn't have looked any deeper. I wouldn't have thought there was anything to that.
Well, yeah, that, and also I think, like you mentioned it in, I think, the message you sent me, that it's hidden in plain sight. Like, you can Google Site C6 and see it, and I feel like those ufologists or those people that are like searching for the truth out there, they're looking for that secret, 20 miles underground base that is not on Google Earth, and that, all that conspiracy stuff. That's what, like, they're looking for, that holy grail. And it makes sense that, like, if I'm the government and that's what I'm really doing there, maybe you make it public, because that's where people aren't going to look. It's hidden in plain sight. And I think that's a really important part here.
You can't go out there to it. It's a restricted site. It's located, 12 miles or so in the inside of the base. You can't really, go into it or anything. But the outside of it, like I said, it's such a big base. There's so much other stuff to see there. This little radar station there looks like nothing. I mean, I don't even know if, like, civilians could see it or get close enough to see it. But if I was going to put something somewhere, that's where I would probably put it, because when I started talking about this on one of the podcasts, and this is another thing that made me come forward, there were people that came out of the woodwork, just over the top criticism about what I was saying. And this one guy, he was former Air Force, and he was saying, "Oh, Eglin's just for a good duty station for families, and you can go to the beach." I said, "Yeah, that's great. I've been there on vacation, but they also do other things there, you know." And I asked him, I said, "Have you ever been to the site? Did you even know it was there?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, I rest my case." You know, it's just a lot of people, you know, they've heard about this if they've looked up any information on radars, but this other stuff, no. And when the congressman went down there, I think it was Luna and Gates and Burchett. When I heard they were going down there, I just laughed because I knew they were going to get the door slammed in their face, and they did.
Yeah. Or at the very least, if they got in, nothing to see here, they would, board everything up and see, look, we're just looking for space junk here. We're not looking for UFOs. It's the whole like sleight of hand kind of thing. You mentioned too, there was an incident where you were at the base and they told you to go inside because there was something flying around outside. Could you tell that story too?
Yeah, that was at night. That was shortly before we left there. We were outside. It was probably around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. The guys were playing cards, and we were billeted in Quonset huts out there, and we were located about 5 miles away from the Army Ranger camp that's stationed there. We didn't have a curfew or anything, and our first sergeant came out there and said, "Everybody get inside now." Just no explanation, no nothing. That happened to us twice there. When we first got there during the daytime, we had to evacuate the area where we were at. I think it was because they do like bomb runs or something close by. I know the day we convoyed in the place, they had just bombed something and it scared the wildlife, and a bear came out and hit one of our Humvees in the convoy, hit one of our up-armored Humvees, and bounced off of it. The doors on those things are like 500 pounds.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was interesting to see. I didn't even know they had bears down there.
Yeah. Wow. So what exactly happened then? So they just told they saw something flying outside, and they just said, "Everyone get inside."
Yeah, there was. Yeah, and I told Ross this too. I said there was something there they did not want us to see. And I remember one day we were by the one of the main runways there, and there's a huge airplane hangar at the end of it. And I was eating lunch with one of the Air Force Security Force guys I was riding with that day, and I see these white jets taking off with no markings on them whatsoever. And I said, "What are those planes?" He said, "Well, we refer to them as secret squirrel planes." And I said, who's in these things? He said it was CIA. They come down there, and they have different projects they do, which I've heard before that they have a group down there. I don't know exactly where, but
almost like the Janet flights in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's like special planes that land there with special operatives or just special important people, VIPs that travel to the bases and things like that.
Yeah, that was the impression that I got from it, that there was something like that.
Yeah,
I'd never seen them.
You haven't seen those planes, or
I'd never seen those in my entire military service like that. I spent 10 years in the military serving in 2 branches, and I never saw planes like that before.
But you did see them at Eglin that day.
Yes. Yeah, I saw them that day.
Yeah, I'm just kind of taking all this in, Bill, and I probably should have said this. I might cut this out of the recording, but our goal with this podcast is just to get, try to get closer to the truth. And it's not just a UFO alien podcast. It's all about, time loss and just like all these, consciousness and all the things that we're trying to get to the bottom of, and aliens and UFOs and things like that are definitely at the center of it, I would say. And we've spoken to people that have seen UFOs, and those are incredible stories. But what you're describing, I think, as a fan of listening to these sort of stories, and like myself, and just looking at other YouTube channels that have interviewed other whistleblowers, like we talked about Weaponize and things like that. To me, this is your story is a piece of the puzzle that is at least missing in my brain. And what I mean by that is you always get closer to the truth, and then you hit this brick wall, which is, well, we can't talk about that because of national security, and it's no one wants to talk about that, and it always gets bleeped out and things like that. And for me, I'm just like, okay, what does the government have that's so powerful, or what does it really matter if China or Russia knows something, right? China and Russia probably already do know these things anyway, and they probably have it too. So why is it? But then I hear your story about Site C6, and I hear about radar that covers a globe, which deep down in my gut, I think I kind of knew that we probably had something like that. To see something the size of a grapefruit, 22 nautical miles out in space.
22,000. Yeah.
Yeah, 22,000 miles outside of space. That is like way more powerful than what I was thinking it was. And if that is true, and if that's what they're doing at Site C6, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind they're detecting anomalies there.
Well, like I said, if you Google Site C6, it'll tell you that if you Google it. But what they won't tell you.
About the radar, or what will they tell me if I Google it?
They'll tell you that it has those capabilities. Chris Mellon talks about it, but he won't mention specifics. He won't talk about where the radar's located or the radar by name. I don't know why he doesn't, because it's online. You can Google it. It probably won't be after, or it gets out, that they also monitor UAPs there. But he told me that if they have those capabilities, there's no doubt in my mind they know where they go when they get here. They know where they exit. And once you know this information, you know that they're able to track things all over the place. And these little grainy photos that they present to the public are just BS.
Hey, if you're into the strange and unexplained, we've probably got a lot in common. I'm Robert Maxwell, and on my YouTube channel, Cabin in the Woods, I cover Bigfoot encounters and delve into the mountains of evidence most people are largely unaware of. But I go deeper than anyone else I know of. Using facts and logic, I prove the skeptics wrong and build the strongest case for the existence of the beings we call Sasquatch that you'll find anywhere on YouTube. So if you're tired of those surface-level stories and want something with real depth and substance, just search Cabin in the Woods Bigfoot on YouTube. You'll know it when you see it.
In May of 2025, Christopher Mellon did a presentation on radar and UAP. This is what William was talking about, and you're about to hear a clip of that right now.
This is a map that displays roughly the coverage provided by something called the Solid State Phased Array Radar System. These are reportedly the most powerful emitters on the planet. If there are other civilizations in nearby solar systems, they're more likely to detect these emitters than probably anything else on our planet.
Why doesn't Chris Mellon mention Site C6 here? Is it because Site C6 isn't as powerful as what William is saying? Is it because Chris Mellon is told not to mention it? I don't think that's the case. Chris Mellon seems to be pretty straightforward with this kind of stuff. Is it just because Site C6 isn't a part of that array that he's talking about? I don't know.
How many UAP would you guess they have detected in, say, the last 20 years that have been reported to Arrow?
Zero. He said
Zero. How come this thing never detects any UAP? How is that possible? These are the most powerful emitters on the planet. And look at the area they cover. And oh, by the way, when you look at the area they cover, we keep having reports over and over again from tactical systems, from ships, plane, and aircraft in the areas covered by these radar. So Aegis ships, planes flown by Mr. Ryan here and his naval aviator colleagues and others are reporting UAP constantly in these areas, but somehow these systems never seem to see a UAP ever. How is that possible? And how come nobody's asking about that? Is this a Chinese balloon situation where all we need to do is tweak the filters? And lo and behold, we're going to bring into focus something which is, drones, if nothing else, they're a vital, absolutely vital air security significance.
I've been listening to some of these stories that are being put out, and some of them I just know aren't true. Like, there's one guy, he claims that he was off in a jungle in Indonesia, and his unit was sent out there without radios. I think it was a humanitarian mission. They'd had a earthquake or something out there.
William is talking about Michael Herrera, who's a former U.S. Marine who came forward with a widely publicized UFO whistleblower story. He claims that while being deployed in Indonesia in 2009 during a humanitarian mission, he and his unit encountered a large black triangular UFO in the jungle, which was allegedly being loaded with human cargo by U.S. paramilitary forces using anti-gravity tech. He states that the craft had no visible seams, no rivets, and appeared to defy known physics. His team had no comms, and they were threatened at gunpoint by covert personnel in order to forget what they saw. Back to the story.
He said that the only thing was about the story, they didn't give us comms before we went out. And I said, that's never happened in Marine Corps history. They would never send people out on a real-world mission without comms or communication devices of some type, because you might have to have an extraction early. You might have to change your landing zones. You might have to chopper somebody out that gets hurt. And for him to tell people, I mean, his whole story hinges on the fact that they did not have communications and weren't issued any. That's against Marine Corps field doctrine. Now, I have plenty of friends that can back up my credibility to this day that I served with. Marines don't leave each other hanging like that. Along the way, you make friends, and he cannot get one person to back up his story. And I don't care about the consequences. If it happened, it happened. And if I saw my buddy taking flack for something, I would say, hey, this happened.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's a good point.
Pass this story off as truth, I have problems with that. For another reason, if a UFO was in a clearing like that, how come the helicopter pilots didn't see it on the way in from the air?
It's a good point too.
If there was a UFO out there in a field somewhere pretty close to their landing zone where they were getting picked up, you're going to see that from the air. And they're passing this story off as legit, and I laugh every time I see that story. And I've argued with the guy pushing that story, and I've told him, I said, this would never happen this way. The Marine Corps would never do that. They would never send, for one, a group of guys out into the field on a real-world mission without a radio. I saw that, and I saw, some of the people pushing his story. The guy was put out of the Marine Corps with no option to re-enlist because he went UA. I think he got a general under honorable circumstances discharge, and everybody that knew him and everybody that I knew in the Marine Corps that got that type of discharge was a problem child.
What do you think about other whistleblowers like David Grusch?
I'll tell you right now, the only people I listen to at this point are David Grusch and Dr. Eric Davis.
Okay.
Well, I don't listen to nobody else as far as their word goes. I believe Lou Elizondo at this point. I think he wants out of this discussion. He's sabotaging himself. I had an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. for Dr. Greer's, I think it was a National Press Club conference or something like that.
Yeah, like the whistleblower conference.
I'm glad I did not go to that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make enemies, but I will say that there's something about Greer. I'd love to talk to him one day to maybe change my opinion, but there's something about him that just gives me like the ick. I don't know what it is. I mean, what do you think about Jake Barber, the recent? What do you think about that guy? Because I feel like that he's in alignment a little bit with what Greer is saying.
Yeah. Here's what when Lou tried to describe that guy as a tier 1 operator, I knew that his job in the Air Force was airplane mechanic. I knew that. I don't know why he's vouching for these people when they're just normal airplane mechanics, and I just feel like they're reaching hard at this point for some really crazy stuff. And I wish more military guys were in this topic because they could back up a lot of the things that I'm saying about some of these stories that are being told as well. You won't find one Marine that believes Herrera's story.
That's interesting because as a civilian, I mean, I don't know that stuff. And again, his story was also, there's a couple parts of the story I'm like, that seems odd because doesn't he claim too that the craft is like a what do they call it, an alien replicated vehicle, like an ARV, where it's actually ours that we've like reverse engineered and they were transporting humans or something? Isn't it something weird?
That's the question Greer was asking me when he sent me the email. Was it an ARV? And I'm like, what is an ARV? What is that? And then I looked that up, an alien reproduction vehicle. I was like, no, what I saw was I've never seen one like it since.
It's really weird. But the claims for well, let me play devil's advocate for a second, because I think Bob Lazar, if you're familiar with his story at all, I think it kind of falls into this category, and same with Jake Barber. Bob Lazar, the number one thing that people always say about him is that his credibility is out the window because there's no proof he went to MIT. There's no proof that he worked at was it EG&G Labs, I think, or was it Los Alamos Labs, I think. I'm sorry, my brain's all scattered today. I'll get it right eventually. I'll edit it and fix it in post. But that's the credibility issue with him. And with Barber, you're right. He was just like a military helicopter mechanic, and then all of a sudden he got elevated to tier 1 operative. Yeah, it's like, what? But if you're the military, like, wouldn't that be a good out? Like, oh, this guy is he's just a helicopter pilot. You don't gotta worry about him. But if they train him and give him special skills, like behind closed doors, that's what everyone would think. Oh, he's just a helicopter pilot. Oh, Bob Lazar is just a guy that put a jet engine in his car. Like, he's not. There's no way he worked there. It's a way to discredit them, just in the same way that Eglin Air Force Base is. They don't monitor UFOs. What are you, crazy? That kind of thing. It's like hidden in plain sight, kind of. I don't know. When
I heard the Jake Barber story, I couldn't even watch the entire interview when he was talking about they summon UFOs or something like that. I mean, I know what I saw. I didn't summon it. I don't think I summoned it. It just showed up.
Yeah, it's a crazy claim, the fact that you can like lure these crafts in. But again, from my perspective, it is such a crazy claim that it sounds crazy me saying these words, but if they can prove it somehow, like if they can draw these things in and record it and it's repeatable, well, I mean that's pretty impressive, I think. But they've yet to do that. So
I guess that remains to be seen. His case. So I guess I'll just put a question mark by his name. But I personally, I don't believe that story. I just think that there's a lot of things coming out, and it's like, come on, people, we got to stay on track here. We're getting diverted on these crazy stories, and these crazy stories are the one that's being perpetuated. Well, if it's true, show us some proof. show us something that we can use. That's why I say, at least what I'm saying, you have an idea of where they watch these things from. And Chris Mellon's pretty much came out and talked about our capabilities of doing that, but he won't mention it by name. I came forward to talk to Ross about this stuff. He basically told me at the end of the interview he didn't believe what I had to say. So,
Really?
yeah. And I mean, I felt it, and I was nervous. Don't get me wrong. I was really nervous talking to him because it's not like a podcast interview. We're talking national news here.
Yeah. NewsNation.
I had never given an interview like that in my life. And yeah, I was nervous about it. I mean, they kept trying to get the lighting right and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I just want to say what I got to say and be done. That's why I decided to do, some podcast interviews about it, because I just felt like I don't know if it was intentional what he did, or maybe he's going to air it someday. I don't know. But he pretty much told me he didn't believe what I had to say at the end of the interview. And I was like, oh, wow. I don't know if somebody's in his ear telling him, to do certain things. That's possible, because I do believe there's some kind of controlled disclosure going on right now. Because believe me, if this stuff wasn't meant to get out, it would not be out. Like David Grusch said, he's seen a lot of stuff that will never see the light of day in the public eye. And I believe that. You guys should do some research on a lady named Amy Eskridge. She was a lady working on a propulsion system over there, and she came up dead. Supposedly she committed suicide. And after that happened, that's when David Grusch came forward. And I've often wondered if that's who he was talking to or talking about when he said that there had been people that had died, involved in the research stuff, because he was really scared. Huntsville is a very interesting place right now because they're trying to do the changeover to make it the Space Command.
I did not know that.
Yeah, in Alabama, they're putting out, that's where it's going. Space Command's coming here. I've often wondered if that's one of the people that Grusch was talking about.
Amy Eskridge is an interesting case. Sorry, Justin.
No, go ahead.
Going back to a previous recording we've done, she came up with Matt from Bad Aliens. Like, he brought her up as well.
You're right. I
As
forgot
someone
about that.
to look into. She was working apparently on some sort of anti-gravitic tech, and she'd written a paper and was doing quite a bit in this space, and then, mysteriously dies in her early 30s, which is a little too young. But
Yeah, what's going on with that? I mean,
she claimed there's videos of her on YouTube where she claimed that they were using some kind of device to burn her skin or something through her walls. I mean, she's got a few videos that she posted. You guys ought to check them out. She claimed that they were messing with her like really bad.
you mean the government messing with her, or
Yeah,
ET?
because she was wanting to branch off and start her own company.
yeah, that's right. I read after the last time she came up in a conversation we had, Bill. I did read a paper that she published, and it for me as like a non-scientific person, it was crazy. She published a paper talking about how to build UFOs, like here are the equations for anti-gravitic technology. Here's how you could incorporate it into the design of some sort of flying saucer or craft. She was referencing Nikola Tesla. It was published. It's online. You can read it. But yeah, she had started her own company and was doing something in this space that even as someone who's not into this stuff, even if you didn't put your conspiracy theory hat on, you would read that paper and think, oh, you're pissing off some higher people with this work.
Yeah.
Like, you're clearly working on stuff that you probably shouldn't be as just a member of the public. But scary and a cautionary tale, I think.
I see, or a lot of people talk about my story, and wonder if I should be nervous. And I said, look, I never signed an NDA about this place. I just think I just happened to be like this whistleblower that came out, just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And I had to figure that out from and talking to someone who actually worked there. This wasn't just something I thought of out of thin air. I talked to somebody that actually worked there for a few years, and he had some crazy stories. He said one night they brought something up to the site covered on a flatbed truck. He didn't get to see it, but he also told me that during the there was some other UFO sightings that were happening down in Florida, the late 80s, the Gulf Breeze sightings. He said they were monitoring the Gulf Breeze sightings from Site C6 from some of the friends that he had that were working at the site then, after he left.
So basically what you're saying is when the Gulf Breeze sightings were happening, they just were using the radar at Eglin to basically monitor and track it and to record it and to probably do all the things, They probably have that data, that secret database that they have of all the millions of UFO data. It's probably in there somewhere, I'd imagine, is what you're saying.
When the new whistleblower came out, I emailed a producer there at NewsNation. I asked him, I said, you believe me now?
The person that William is referring to now is Matthew Brown, a whistleblower who came forward on the Weaponized podcast with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. Brown is best known for discovering and helped leak the Immaculate Constellation document, a slide deck that allegedly outlines a covert U.S. government program involving the tracking and recovery of non-human craft.
What specifically did Matthew Brown say that resonated with you?
With me, he talked about the capabilities that they had to track it, which he just scratched the surface, really. I heard that and I thought, well, this is basically what I was telling Ross. And this guy, he didn't elaborate more on his story because all I got from that interview was we track UFOs and government knows how to track them. That's basically what I got out of that interview. And Sean Kirkpatrick was lying.
Yeah.
There was a 2-part series, and out of those 2 parts, that's what I got out of both of those.
I was just saying, I think maybe I'm in my head. Maybe I need to drink another cup of coffee, even though it's at night. But I don't know. I get the sense, like just hearing you talk, that it feels like you're pressing the button more so than other whistleblowers that I've heard in other podcasts. Meaning, you're just like, everyone's beating around the bush. It's happening at Eglin. That's where it's at. And you were stationed there. Like you're just like, everyone look there. I'm tired of the bullshit. Just that's what's happening, and everyone else is scared to say it. And I wonder why that is.
I went to the site. I saw it myself. Of course, they're not going to let me monitor UFOs for like a radar tech.
Sure.
But I was a military policeman long enough, and I've got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice with a minor in psychology. I had a hunch, and I could tell there was something next level going on there. And my hunch was right. I mean, I looked into it, and this guy that I talked to, he told me, he said, look, I'm getting up there in my years. Our military, he said, I had no problem talking to you. And he asked me some questions to make sure I was military, just military things. When he told me that, I saved all the chat transcripts I had with him. His name's Rob. He wouldn't tell me his last name, but there's a picture of him on the chat transcripts that I sent to NewsNation.
So William did end up sharing the screenshots that he sent to NewsNation from the conversation with this guy named Rob on Reddit. Apparently, Rob is a disabled veteran who says that he worked at Eglin Air Force Base in the 1980s, doing radar tech, crypto operations, and contract work for companies like RCA, GE Aerospace, and Rockwell. He even mentions having connections to Cheyenne Mountain NORAD. Now, whether Rob is who he says he is, we don't know. There's no hard evidence here, just a Reddit exchange. but taken at face value, it adds to the lore surrounding Eglin and Site C6 and gives us one more piece of the puzzle. And it does seem to appear like there's someone else out there that is corroborating Williams' claims.
These guys were having a conversation about the capabilities of the radar. And they were saying that if like a flock of birds flew in front of this thing, it would just make them explode.
Jesus Christ. Wow.
It's such a big thing to come forward because you know you're going to be attacked, by different people. And I know when I came out with my story, I had some like just over the top criticism. That's what surprised me. Just, people just amazingly critical for no reason about small things. And I was just like, yeah, I'm pushing the right buttons because I'm pissing somebody off.
Yeah.
Like Tim Burchett says, you can always tell when you're over the target, they start shooting at you. And that's very true.
I love that.
Very, very true.
I think there's one thing we have in common with the show and your attitude for coming forward is Josh and I are the same person in this regard where I don't give a shit what people think of me. I don't care. And also if people talk shit about us or whatever, like it does not impact me in the lead. I could care less because all I care about is putting out content to help us get closer to the truth. That's my only mission statement that this podcast is trying to do. And I think that aligns with what, why you're coming out and saying this as well. So if this is a piece of the puzzle that'll help us get closer, so be it. Bring on the haters.
So like when I talked to Jeremy Corbell, because I've talked to him on several occasions about my story, he's just not interested. So I don't know if somebody's got his ear, which that's what I think is happening. These guys are probably promised stories and they're going with somebody that's feeding them whatever information and they think they're getting to the truth by all these ridiculous stories they're being told. And it's destroying their credibility is what it looks like to me.
Yeah, if you're fed, 50 stories and you're starting to see a thread, it would make sense that anything that goes against that thread, you would pause and be like, I don't think you're telling the truth because it doesn't fit the narrative that I'm trying to share, right?
Well, you've got people, that listen to Lou when he come out, and then he vouched for this guy, Jake Barber, that can summon UFOs through psionics or whatever. And then people are like, I don't know about that, So what's happened is people start tuning Ross out because they think these stories are so ridiculous. So they stop listening to him, essentially, is what'll happen. And I feel bad for them because they've never served in the military, so they don't know sometimes that they're getting a load of BS when they're being told these stories and they don't know the difference. And then I tell him a real truth and he doesn't even believe my story, or somebody's telling him that it's not true. I don't know which, but it's really odd. Like he was really kind of hostile when the interview began, and I didn't feel at ease at all, So when I do podcasts, most of the time, I feel relaxed enough to talk about it because it's not easy to talk about this stuff. Not for me, anyway. I have to reveal a part of my life that, is really a very personal thing for me. Talking about it, the only reason I'm doing it is because I know the government's lying to people, and they have been for some time.
I just remembered a question I wanted to ask that I'll probably edit closer towards the beginning of this, but you had mentioned that that Site C6 is like a skiff inside of a skiff or something of that nature. So when you entered Site C6, was there a different protocol? Like, did you have to get...
No, I did not go inside the skiff there.
So there is a skiff there, but you were just outside in like the
Right.
non-skiff area.
I never had to go in there or do any of that stuff.
Got it. Okay. That is interesting too. I mean, I guess skiffs are not necessarily meant for just UFOs, obviously, they're just for sensitive information, but
I wished if I had it to do over, I would have talked to the Air Force security force guy that I went to the site with that day, but I was so awestruck, and I felt like my jaw was just down to the floor the entire time, even on the ride back. I just couldn't talk.
do you still have his name? Like, have you reached out to him at all or through any sort of, I know you don't have social media, but like LinkedIn or anything?
No, I don't even think I ever met his or I got his name. Now that happens a lot when you're on patrol with people sometimes, especially from another branch. You may, not know their name, but you learn to make friends quickly in there. You find a topic both of you like, you discuss it and, swap stories and things like that. We talked about football and a little bit about religion before we went up there to the site. And when he took me in there, I mean, now that I think about it, I don't even remember him saying much after we left that site that day. But I had just a million questions going through my mind and thinking about my childhood and what I experienced when I was a kid. And I just had so many questions. And it took me forever to talk to my mother about it. Because, like I said, that happened in 2009. I didn't speak to her about this till 2017 or 18 or something like that. And she drew the craft for the girl that came here, and she said she was doing a documentary. My mother drew it. She took the drawing with her. It didn't take my mother no time to draw the thing that she saw. What I think happened was my mother saw it like, I've heard stories about these things like they'll glow and then the glow will go away and then you could actually see a craft, right? And I think that's what happened. I saw it maybe after, it came down, and then when it finally got to where it wanted to rest, glow came off of it. That's just what I think. That's why she was able to see what it actually looked like.
Do you remember the name of the lady making that documentary, Bill, who came through?
She's actually on Reddit. She won't return any of my calls either. Her name is and I've got her phone number, but I can't never get, if you guys can get a hold of her, hey, tell her I want to see the documentary. Let me see. I'll give it to you.
Josh has a way of getting people to talk.
She had a friend that was going to come with her, but she said that her dad or something didn't want her coming here because they were coming here to meet a stranger, basically, talking about UFOs. So I don't blame. I wouldn't let my daughter go to a place like that either.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you for your service, number one. And number two, thank you for just coming forward and having, the wherewithal and the courage to do that. Because, with the amount of people that we speak to, and this show's relatively new, but still, regardless of the experience that you've had coming forward and talking about to a bunch of knuckleheads on the internet.
Hey, I'm just glad people are trying to get to the truth or that want to know the truth, because there's a lot of people out there who do not care about this topic whatsoever. Like, I've got neighbors. I can't even talk to my neighbors about this. I've mentioned it once or twice, and they just get this bewildered look in their eyes when I bring it, and they think you're crazy, so I don't bring it up anymore. If I knew what it was, it wouldn't be bad. Like, I think a lot of people, if you would just show them what these craft are, and if we've got beings, just show it to people, I think that would satisfy a lot of people's curiosity, and they'd move on, and they would be able to recruit people to work on these craft or whatever, to develop technology, because I think people just want to see what they look like, and that's it. I think once that's done, I think, people will move on, but to live with actually seeing one is another thing. And I personally, because it's been such a fight to get the government to tell you the truth, I just wished I'd never seen it, to be honest.
Scully, if Williams' testimony is true, especially the part about Site C6 monitoring extraterrestrial activity, what does that suggest about the government's actual awareness and involvement in non-human phenomena?
If William's testimony about Site C6 is accurate, it implies a significant level of government awareness and potentially active involvement in monitoring non-human phenomena. The presence of advanced radar capabilities in unmarked jets suggests a concerted effort to track and possibly retrieve UAPs, indicating that such phenomena are taken seriously at high levels. This could mean that the government possesses more information about UAPs than is publicly disclosed, possibly due to national security concerns or the implications of revealing advanced technologies. The involvement of entities like the CIA further supports the notion of a coordinated, possibly clandestine approach to managing these encounters.
William described a silent, glowing orb that moved with unnatural precision and left physical evidence behind. From a scientific standpoint, what kind of technology could explain that, if any?
The silent glowing orb with precise movement and physical evidence suggests advanced propulsion technology, potentially involving electromagnetic fields. High-energy electromagnetic fields could account for the glowing appearance and the burnt circle observed. Such technology might utilize principles beyond current propulsion systems, possibly involving anti-gravity or inertial manipulation. These concepts, while speculative, align with theoretical models in advanced propulsion physics and quantum mechanics.
Okay, and which military bases, based on public info, are most likely to be running classified programs and projects involving ET technology?
Publicly available information suggests that certain U.S. military bases are frequently associated with classified programs, potentially involving extraterrestrial technology. Area 51 in Nevada is the most notorious, often linked to secretive aerospace testing and alleged reverse engineering of alien technology. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio is rumored to house recovered extraterrestrial materials, particularly in its infamous Hangar 18. Edwards Air Force Base in California and the Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake are also mentioned in discussions about advanced aerospace projects. These associations are largely speculative and not officially confirmed, but they persist in public discourse and declassified documents.
Nothing new there. So I guess the last question I have is, how do you think we did as far as the interview with William went? In terms of, did we press him enough? Do you think that we were thorough enough? What do you think?
The interview with William Ray Carter was robust in terms of extracting detailed accounts of his experiences. You pressed him effectively on key elements, such as the physical evidence and military encounters. However, further probing into the psychological impact of his childhood sightings could have added depth. As for your glasses, Justin, they were so crooked. I half expected them to slip off and join the UAPs in their aerial maneuvers.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It is what it is. I can't go back and change the recording, right? I've been sitting here for about 15 minutes trying to figure out what I was going to say at the end of this episode. And honestly, I don't really know what to make of William's claims. But I do know this. Something happened. Something real enough to stick with him for nearly 50 years. And real enough to be ignored by people who say that they're searching for the truth. And honestly, that's where I get stuck. Because if we claim to be after the truth, we can't just cherry pick stories that fit into our narrative. We don't get to sideline the weird ones, or the ones without a punchy headline or a classified document to back them up. The truth doesn't care about our preferences. It doesn't owe us any certainty. But if we're going to find it, we have to be willing to go to the places where no one else is looking. That's what this show is all about. So no, I don't know what to make of William's story. But I do know it's worth asking questions about. And I hope you think the same. So if this episode made you think, if it sparked something, then reach out. You could find us on Instagram at Close Encounter Club. And if you believe in what we're doing here, please hit the follow button or subscribe. And please leave a 5-star review. It does way more than you think it does. And it also helps us keep digging. This podcast was created and hosted by me, Justin Gearhart, produced by Josh Barretto, mixed and mastered by Brett Jarvis, and you've been listening to the Close Encounter Club.